Travels of the Ellis Arbor is an audio narrative set in the world of Bastion using 5e compatible characters. A dark fantasy world with chaos, intrigue, magic, and mystery. The story, setting, and sounds are written by Lonomy and published by lonomy.creative. Tune in for episode 16, Necrosis. Bewildered by the sheer mania of the situation they now found themselves, the crew of the Ellis Arbor slunk back into the shadowed corner of the dormitory. More continued their ministrations on Ed's wounds, slowly knitting the flesh into a manageable shadow of a scar. As Darian drew near to his crew, he pondered over the scene that he was privy to. Mollersby, the rogue that was slain by Carpathian's hand, mysteriously vanishing into thin air. No sooner than they had caught their breath after following the young orphan boy into his bedroom, the interior of the building began to echo with the sounds of footfalls dashing their way through the interior halls. As if in contrast to the bleak tone of the room, the wooden door sprung open as 4 other young humans came barreling into the room. Instead of stopping their approach, the most likely outcome for being face to face with a gang of pirates. More so with beastmen in their midst. They gathered around the crew, poking and pointing at their new guests.
Look, Millicent, it's the people that were outside Ilia's window. The green one and all.
Oh, stop being so loud, Angus. You'll alert the mistress. Hello, sirs. Are you adventurers? Have you come to take us with you?
The incessant questioning and badgering was almost too much for Darian, Ed, Moore, and Nout to take in. Though, despite the racket, their infant charm and unfettered interest in their arrival did much to calm their racing nerves. Carpathian had yet to venture up the shaft to join them, a sign that would likely bolster those nerves once more. Then, from down the corridor of the open chamber, a booming, poignant voice called out to the gaggle of orphan children.
Angus, Millicent, Bovra, Garla, and Ilia. If I hear you've collected another stowaway, you'll never sniff another supper. Get your sorry selves out to the dining room already.
The voice sounded almost strained as an older woman began to gather herself slowly down the hall. Her gait was coupled with the sound of a walking stick, shambling with every laboured footstep she took. And then, peering into view, a stout, aging Caballan woman, a halfling, peered into view. Almost immediately, a look of unbelief took her as her eyes glazed over the currently enamoured crew.
Oh, right. It's you lot from the street. I had a feeling young Ilia might have tried his little escape trick. I only count 4 of you, though. Where's the big, red, horned one?
Almost punctuating her query, the metal grate swung open as Carpathian began to heave himself out of the tunnel, pulling his full size out for all to see. Immediately, the gaggle of 5 orphans retreated to their mistress, seemingly unnerved by his sheer size and frame.
Right then. Haven't exactly made enough food for everyone, but it's almost the children's break time. I'm Tamora, the custodian of Ironfoot Orphanage.
She wiped her hands on her faintly stained apron and gestured up the hall.
This might seem forthcoming, but I'd suggest you make yourself scarce down one of the back dorms. Less windows to peer through. Make yourselves decent and come and join us for some tea. No questions. I'll have nobody going without in this house.
And with practiced hands, she gathered the children around her squat halfling frame, guiding them down the other end of the hall. And one by one, they followed Tamora to what Darian assumed was the dining hall, quietly scraping their feet as they went. And turning toward the now emerged Carpathian, Darian addressed the wizard behind grit teeth.
Let me guess. The hiding of the body was your doing? Did you send the guards on their way as I requested?
Give me a moment to collect my thoughts. I understand your reasoning behind your questions, but I have the very same ones. It was not I that hid the body of the boy. I readied myself to conjure flame, turn the soldiers away as you requested. But by the time I returned, the body was gone. I simply await in the shadows until the guards passed. A strange look shot over the wizard, one that the crew had scarcely seen. His brow furrowed. Carpathian appeared to be deep in thought, his eyes dancing from point to point around the room. It appeared that he was summoning his own reasoning for why this had occurred, although as his perplexed gaze belied, he clearly had little understanding of the event. Even his aether, the resonance of his soul, appeared amiss. It was as if he hadn't been there to begin with. Darian continued to stare intently, looking for any sign of deception in Carpathian's demeanor. As the moments followed, the captain seemed content with his answer and bid them to follow.
Fine. Whatever the reason, we were fortunate that your bloodlust came only at the cost of our foe. Consider this a brief respite from my enmity. Come now. Our host has sent us to one of the other rooms. I suggest you follow.
And so, being careful to not step into the light of the exterior window, Darian led his crew to one of the interior dormitories, away from the prying eyes of the street. The third door on the right was barely ajar and had a light glimmering from within. When taking the initiative, he pushed on the wooden support and entered into the dorm. 4 simple feather beds adorned the walls. Next to each, a simple drawer with a lampstand and a collection of blankets. The light of the room was barely enough for them to make their way around, but each of them took a bed for their own, sat and tended to their effects. Moore and Ed took the nearest bed, sealing the last of the wounds that Ed had sustained. Carpathian loomed over the farthest bed, placing his staff and tome on the table next to it. Nout sidled up to the captain, placing his heavy sack and metallic disc onto the bed as he addressed Darian.
Captain, when will his behavior be enough? Carpathian cannot continue to act as if his actions have no consequences. We are lucky not to be clapped in irons for the murder of a civilian.
Darian held up a hand and gestured for Nout to pause. He took a deep breath and responded with patient resolve.
I am aware of Carpathian's shortcomings, Nout. Do not think I would be rid of him at the first moment of opportunity. You know as well as I that it is never as simple as that. Try as we might to resist, we are all bound together. Carpathian, Moore, Ed, you and I. We cannot simply take our separate paths until that bond is severed. Patience and practice. This is not the worst outcome. I am at least grateful that we did not meet our end by the hands of those urchins.
And as the captain spoke, there seemed to be a quiet reverence in the room. Rarely did they ever speak on their ill-gotten bond. They had travelled aboard the Ellis Arbor and across the many realms for so long now that it rarely became apparent to speak on it. Darian was right, however. They could not simply be rid of each other. Try as they might, there are no means to break the bond they currently share. And then quietly, Edward spoke through strained breaths. Captain, look at your nightstand. Does yours have a name also? Is that them? And turning toward the side table, the lit candle began to dapple light on the faintest glimmer of copper. As Ed had suggested, a name was written upon the nightstand. Arvel. He briefly recalled the encounter with Killian and his gang. Arvel was the name of the crossbow-wielding man, the tall one in the long coat. Darian's thoughts raced once more as he turned toward the other empty nightstand. This one too. In fact, you'd not be surprised to hear a familiar name. This one says Killian. What a strange occurrence. In turn, Darian and Nout surveyed the remaining bedsides. Both Molesby and Mercurial took the far beds, their names scratched into the copper plate in the same manner as the other two. What could this mean? Was this their home? Were the four of them orphans of this ill-begotten mill? And without care, Carpathian tossed open one of the drawers at Killian's bedside. And as he did, a small sheath of paper scattered from underneath the drawer, cascading across the floor. Taking it in hand, Darian perused the contents and found a few scratches of paper. Poorly written though they were, they appeared to be letters or memoirs, written in the hand of a young, uneducated boy. The first Darian pulled had perhaps the most garish handwriting he'd ever seen. What he could make out were the musings of a young boy, writing about his dreams. Under the candlelight, he pieced together the first letter.
I had the dream again. The ocean turned red, and the sky turned black. I could hear the woman in my head. The lady. She talked about my destiny, my path. Something about necrosis. She either said, deny the necrosis, or I'm the necrosis. I don't understand, but she keeps coming to me every night.
As his words continued, the door opened a crack more, and stepping into the dimly lit room, Tamora returned, her right hand clutching her walking stick and her left holding tight to a steaming hot kettle. The warmth of the steam began to fill the air as she addressed the crew.
Ah, I see. You're quick to go snooping too. Not unlike some boys I once knew. Come take a seat with me. I suspect I can shed some light. You'll find there are many and more stories I could tell you about Killian Besk and his old schoolmates.
Travels of the Ellis Arbor is made possible by the generous support of our subscribers, followers, and most notably, our patrons. Thanks to all of our Moon, Wedge, Crown, and Hex tier patrons for supporting us so far on this journey. Please subscribe, give a like or a comment, follow us on Twitter, and stay tuned for the next episode. Don't forget, take care of each other.